One of the most interesting characters in Dungeon Meshi has to be Toshiro, or Shuro if you listen only to Lios pronounce his name. Shuro is one of the original party members of Laios' group that got defeated by the Red Dragon that took Fallen at the beginning of the series. Though there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes with Shuro, we didn't really get a lot of information about him until much later in the series. When Kabru and Shuro finally meet, this is where we start to see how Shuro has dealt with Fallen's capture and possible death by the Red Dragon. We see things like his own struggles with caring for himself, pushing himself and his party of retainers deeper into the dungeon because he must save Fallen. In comparison, we see the opposite side of things with Laios' group. We see their group spend time learning about the dungeon, the ecosystems, cooking special food made with the monsters they've slain, and even helping other groups along the way. Their shared but flipped dynamic doesn't stop there. It enhances the future conflict shared between both characters later on in the series. Let's start with some more basic stuff about Shuro so we get a better idea of who he is, where he came from, and how he is as a person in general. Shuro grew up in an eastern country that I'm pretty sure we never actually heard the name of, but he was born into royalty in that country. Because of his royalty status, Shuro was appointed retainers that would guide, teach, and protect him throughout his life. Some of these retainers were pretty much slaves, like Izutsumi and the beautiful Tade. The most senior of these retainers, though, is Maizuru, the paper-summoning demon lady. Throughout Shuro's life, Maizuru was there to teach him about the ways of life, royalty, and education. Out of everyone, I would say she is the most devoted and attached to Shuro as a person, going as far to care for him even when he won't care for himself, and believing he'll be a great successor to his father when the time comes for him to actually succeed in the throne. Despite this, we see a lot of Shuro's strengths and weaknesses as a character throughout the series. We see that he's an excellent fighter, being able to cut through a giant serpent with one strike and beheading it. We see that he can make it through the dungeon relatively easily because of his strength and skill. Though his timidness and quiet personality can lead to misunderstandings and resentment, he does share about his life and his country with Lios. Though his relationship is a special kind of hell for Shuro, it did show a level of honest pride and love for where he came from to share parts of his lived experience with Lios. But like I said, his personality starts to strain itself when things get difficult. One of Shuro's biggest weaknesses as a character is his personality in the face of honesty, earnestness, and conflict. Conflict is a natural part of life and comes in a whole lot of different flavors, but for Shuro, it comes mainly in one flavor: Lios. Okay, this one is probably the biggest thing that people get hung up on when it comes to Shuro and Lios. While the two don't hate each other like they're sworn enemies, they have a lot of friction due to their conflicting personalities and misunderstandings about each other. Lios, for the most part, views Shuro as his first friend on the island since he and Fallen arrived. Lios was a lonely guy, and really only had Fallen as his closest confidant. It's normal for siblings to rely on each other and even have strong relationships that can resemble that of regular friendships. But for a lot of people, it's nice to have friends and relationships outside of your family. This allows you to meet new people from different backgrounds and ways of thinking. For Lios, this was Shuro. So of course, when Shuro decided to hang around a lot, Lios spent a lot of his time trying to learn more about Shuro. What about his country, what he'd like to do, telling him that they were good friends and trying to be supportive. But because Lios is Lios, he didn't fully understand the subtle cues of tension or uncomfortableness that Shuro was displaying. But Shuro is kind of an outsider to most of these people and cultures. That's not to say they didn't like him or trust him or even had a deep-seated racist view of him or something. It's something that people have to learn about you to know how to treat you the way that you want to be treated. Otherwise, it's at a polite, respectful distance. That's the general vibe I got from Shuro up until he tried getting closer to Fallen, because he was infatuated with her. He wanted to be left mostly at arm's length away for his own comfort until he initiated that connection. I think that's why Lios immediately buddying up with him and trying to include himself in everything Shuro and Fallen were doing was so annoying. Lios was practically ignoring the rules of politeness by interfering with Shuro's personal time with other people. And outside of that, Lios kept trying to force that connection by continuously asking personal questions and sentiments onto Shuro that, honestly, can be very intimidating and uncomfortable to take on if you just don't like someone, but don't have the personal skills to navigate those tough conversations. It's not to say that either of them are wrong for how they feel about each other or how their relationship stands, but the biggest problem was miscommunication and misunderstanding. This caused resentment and ultimately led to their fight after Lios admitted to helping Marcel resurrect Fallen after the Red Dragon fight. Now, you might be asking, what exactly is the big misunderstanding of Shuro? He seems just like an awkward fellow, but nothing too complex, right? When I first watched the series, I had a lot of mixed feelings about him, because I wasn't fully understanding of his reasons for leaving the party after the fight with the Red Dragon. I thought he was arrogant, standoffish, and I really didn't like his vibe. Then we learned more about him, and though I still felt that standoffish nature, I started to see a much more big and clear picture of him in general. His personality from his own upbringing as a royal and now as an adult in the big world. His passive nature due to being misunderstood and not wanting to correct people or overstep personal, respectful boundaries, and his own issues he never really worked through. I think there are some people out there who still view Shuro as an antagonist to Lios and the group because of his choice to snitch on them for the resurrection spell. And though I can understand that point of view as someone who loves Lios and his group a lot, I also think it's ignoring Shuro's own struggles and point of view as a character. Shuro had to deal with a lot coming to the island. His name isn't even Shuro, for fuck's sake. He's just so deep in it now that he can't correct people because of the shit Lios has been saying all this time. Shuro feels like he has to appear calm, collected, and in control of his own emotions while always striving to do things the right way. Instead of just telling Lios he doesn't want to be friends and hang out around each other, he subtly tries to do the right thing by avoiding the topic head on, but dropping subtle hints so Lios can gracefully back off. Instead of letting himself rest and eat, he has to rush through the dungeon to save Fallen as fast as possible because he needs to save her and prove to her that he loves her. If he continued at the pace he was going at, he and his party would have just died again and again, by the way. Shuro, after finally letting himself calm down, rest, and finally eating, hears that Lios and his party did something so dangerous and criminal and just snaps completely. This isn't some social situation where people can be annoying, but it's not that big of a deal. They broke a natural taboo and brought the dead back to life using ancient magic that was specifically banned in almost all societies around the world in this series. Shuro confronted Lios' party and even fought with them about this, threatening to turn them all in because they did something so dangerous and selfish instead of just accepting that Fallen died. This is Shuro's responsibility and duty to doing what is right, talking. I think people misunderstand that side of him and conflate it with who he is entirely as a person. Shuro has always had trouble expressing himself and being honest with how he feels. So when it comes to something as serious as this, it becomes kind of a mixed bag. He finally feels strongly enough to express the panic and anger he feels towards the careless attitude of Lios and his party doing something so dangerous. But at the same time, I think it was his own anger at his helplessness in saving Fallen from the Red Dragon that pushed him over the edge. He didn't save Fallen, but Lios and his party did do something so powerful and dangerous to themselves in order to bring Fallen back to life. It's not hard to think that Shuro may view that as his own failing instead of a miracle that saved Fallen's life from being extinguished forever. All his effort up until this point was pointless if it was already too late. It had to be Lios' party that saved Fallen, not him. It wasn't until his full-on fistfight with Lios did we see all these emotions finally reach a boiling point and coming out the only way that he knows how. Fighting. Shuro and Lios start bickering and throwing jabs at each other both literally and verbally. It isn't until Shuro finally admits his own feelings towards Lios that it starts to finally click with him that Shuro just did not like him. They finally open up to each other, and Lios even throws some good barbs right back at him, asking things like, "Why didn't you just say something? What's the point of you having a mouth if you don't talk? How am I supposed to know?" I think this was the turning point for both of these characters and their own relationship with each other at large. It's after this moment we see some changes between the two of them that show that despite all the conflict, they still have some genuine respect and consideration for each other. Lios accepts that Shuro and him are not really that close of friends, but starts to truly understand his point of view and feelings better. Not just some rose-colored glasses version that Lios only viewed from his side. Shuro sees the determination and love that Lios has for not only Fallen, but his party, the dungeon, and himself. He sees that Lios is taking this seriously and doing everything he can to make sure they can save Fallen, beat the Mad Mage, and get out safely. I think this is the point where we finally see some recognition that these two men, outside of their own conflict, are very similar to each other, but go about things differently. Lios is passionate, honest, and open about how he feels, even when it's annoying or awkward. Shuro is reserved, respectful, and always at alert for signs and changes that could indicate something is wrong. He's always at arm's length and makes sure he never oversteps himself in case it affects others negatively, even if it means he doesn't get to be heard or seen for who he is. It's after this pivotal fight between the two of them that the real beef between them has finally been squashed. They both come to a better understanding of each other and move forward the only way they both know how. For Shuro, he knows that he has to go back to the surface to recuperate from his excursion into the dungeon for Fallen, but he becomes a little bit more understanding of Lios' reasons for going deeper into the dungeon, of resurrecting Fallen, and even willing to help him escape from the dungeon and the country if he needs it. This is massive for Shuro, and to a lesser extent Lios. Their relationship could have completely blown up. They could have hated each other for the harsh words and actions they shared. But because of the honesty and understanding they finally got to share and experience together, Shuro is allowing himself to do what he feels is right, and Lios happily listens and accepts his help. Even after returning to the surface, Shuro is willing to talk to the Island Lord about the updates to the dungeon, but not including the story about Lios and his party as a way of protecting them. This is the Shuro that I think he wants to be. Someone who follows what he feels is right, but still not completely reinventing himself as a new person who doesn't have any responsibility, honor, or duty for what he does. We know that Shuro's group, Namori's group, and Kaburu's group are going back into the dungeon with the Canaries by the end of Season 1. As for what's going to happen, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to see some different perspectives from each of the groups Lios has met so far. Maybe they'll use their skills to try and hinder the Canaries from going too deep or from reaching Lios' group too fast. I don't think it's going to work, considering the Canaries are experienced with dungeons and their monsters. A couple of short-lived mortal races are probably not going to stop them too much. Shuro is a misunderstood character, and I think that comes from the favored bias people have towards Lios and his group as the main characters of the series. From what we first see of Shuro, it's easy to view him as an antagonistic character, but really, he isn't. He's just as weird of a dude as Lios is, but he obviously cares about a lot of things and people around him. The biggest issue he had was just not being honest with himself and the same people around him. He's a very good character, and I'm glad there's some emotional depth and conflict between characters I like that doesn't always paint them as good or doing everything right. It's nice to see some natural friction and resolution. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.